Why are you making a child stand for a woman who can't even find her own gate? Derek Voss asked, his smile polished enough for the VIP investors behind him. At gate B17, Caleb Turner's hand rested on Mara's shoulder as his 9-year-old daughter rose from the last open seat, clutching her below and hospital envelope. An elderly woman trembled beside them, one hand on a silver wing pin under her gray sweater. Caleb laid his old denim coat on the chair. She needs it more, Mara whispered. 3 hours earlier, the garage behind Lakeview Regional Airport smelled of motor oil, burnt coffee, and rain on concrete. Caleb Turner stood beneath fluorescent lights that hummed like tired insects, wiping his hands on a rag already black with a night's worth of work. The silver Air Force patch on his denim jacket had faded at the edges, but he still folded the jacket carefully over his arm before locking his toolbox. He had been under the belly of a commuter plane since midnight, tightening access panels and listening to the small, honest sounds machines made when something was not right. Now every muscle in his back ached, but his eyes kept moving to the paper envelope on the workbench. Dallas Pediatric Heart Center. 10:30 a.m. appointment. Do not miss. Mara sat on an overturned crate, swinging her sneakers lightly above the floor, trying to look braver than 9 years old should have to look. Her curls were tucked under a yellow knit cap. Her below was zipped tight against her chest like treasure. Daddy, she said. What if the doctor says I'm okay enough for camp? Caleb smiled, but only halfway, because hope felt fragile when it came folded in medical paper. Then we'll talk about camp, he said. One step at a time. Outside, wind pushed a wet leaf against the garage door with a soft scraping sound. It was a tiny noise, but Caleb noticed it, the way he noticed loose screws, low tire pressure, and people pretending they were fine. He put the envelope inside his jacket pocket, checked their boarding passes for Whitmore Skies Flight 218 from Cleveland to Dallas, then knelt and tied Mara's left shoelace again. It was already tied. She knew that. So did he. Some fathers. Prayed out loud. Caleb made knots. By the time they reached the terminal, morning travelers had filled the airport with rolling bags, perfume, fast food grease, and impatience. Gate B17 glowed cold blue on the departure screen. Boarding would begin soon. Mara found the last open seat near the window and sank into it with relief, her small legs still tired from the long walk across the concourse. Caleb stood beside her, one hand on the handle of his toolbox, eyes scanning the gate the way he used to scan a flight line before dawn. That was when he saw the elderly woman. She stood just outside the priority lane, small beneath the bright airport lights, gray sweater buttoned wrong at the throat, cane trembling against the tile. People flowed around her as if she were a misplaced suitcase. Her boarding pass was pinched so tightly in her fingers that the paper had creased white along the fold. Derek Voss, Regional Customer Experience Director, stood a few yards away in a dark suit, guiding a cluster of VIP investors with practiced warmth. We appreciate your patience, he said to them, then turned toward the woman with the same smile but none of the kindness. Ma'am, you'll need to step out of the boarding path. The woman tried to move. Her cane slipped. Her knees softened. Caleb was already moving before anyone gasped. He caught her elbow gently, not gripping, just steadying. Mara stood up without being asked twice, still holding her envelope against her chest. Caleb looked down at his daughter. Sweetheart, can we give her your seat? Mara glanced at the woman's shaking hand, then at the chair, then at her father. She nodded. Caleb placed his denim coat on the seat first, smoothing it flat with his calloused palm. Here you go, ma'am, he said. Take your time. The woman lowered herself slowly, breathing as if she had been holding back pain for a long time. For one brief second, her sweater shifted, and the silver wing pin beneath it caught the gate lights. Caleb saw 2 letters scratched into the back before her hand covered it again. Edopiavu. The 2 scratched letters stayed in Caleb's mind longer than they should have. Edopiavu. Not shiny enough to be expensive, not clean enough to be decorative. Just worn silver catching the blue-white light of gate B17 before the old woman covered it with trembling fingers. Caleb did not stare. Men like him had learned not to make people feel inspected when they were already embarrassed. He only stepped back, gave her space, and kept Mara close beside his leg. Then Derek Voss arrived with the smooth footsteps of a man who had never needed to hurry because other people moved for him. "Sir," Derek said, soft enough to sound polite and loud enough for the nearest passengers to hear. "I'm going to need you to step aside." Caleb turned. She almost fell. "We saw," Derek replied, "and we appreciate your concern." She needed a seat. "Our team was handling it." The words landed clean, polished, harmless on the surface. But something beneath them made Mara press her shoulder into Caleb's hip. The gate smelled of burnt espresso from the kiosk, wet wool from winter coats, and the faint chemical shine of floor cleaner. Behind Derek, the VIP investors stood near the priority lane with leather briefcases and careful faces, pretending not to watch while watching everything. One of them glanced at Caleb's oil-darkened fingernails, then at the frayed cuff of his denim jacket now spread beneath Eleanor like a poor man's blanket. "Dad," Mara whispered, "did we do something wrong?" Caleb rested one hand on her shoulder. "No, baby." Derek's smile did not move. "Little misunderstanding, sweetheart," he said, bending slightly toward Mara though he had not asked her name. "Adults are just making sure everyone boards safely." Mara looked down at her sneakers. Caleb saw it happen, the first quiet bruise of the morning, not on skin but somewhere deeper, where a child begins to wonder if kindness embarrasses grown-ups. Eleanor watched too. Her eyes, pale gray and tired, shifted from Mara's lowered face to Derek's perfect tie. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Derek turned to the gate agent, a young woman named Lily whose badge shook slightly on its lanyard. "Can we confirm this passenger's boarding status?" he asked. "Of course, Mr. Voss." Lily took Eleanor's crumpled boarding pass with both hands. The paper had been folded so many times the corners had softened like cloth. She smoothed it against the counter, scanned it once, then frowned. The scanner chirped, but not the usual clean tone Caleb had heard 100 times in terminals. This one was lower, hesitant, like a machine clearing its throat. Lily scanned again. A small amber message flashed on her screen. Caleb caught only part of it before Derek shifted closer. "Manual verify. F-audit/1978. "There seems to be a code," Lily said. "It's probably an old database artifact," Derek interrupted. "Happens with legacy records. Should I call support?" "Not necessary." Caleb did not move, but his eyes narrowed a fraction. Machines did not ask for manual verification because they were sentimental. They asked because something had not matched. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the cane handle. The silver wing pin under her sweater rose and fell with one measured breath. Derek slid the boarding pass from Lily's hand before she could look again. "Ma'am," he said to Eleanor, voice warm enough to fool someone at a distance. "Are you certain you're at the correct gate?" Eleanor looked at him. "This is flight 218. "Yes, ma'am, but travel can be confusing, especially during priority boarding." A man in a navy blazer gave a small laugh through his nose. Another passenger murmured, "This is why they should board families and elderly separate." Someone else said, not quietly enough, "Or keep the drama away from first class." Caleb felt Mara flinch. He wanted to answer. He wanted to tell them he had worked hangars at 3 in the morning while they slept above cloud cover. He wanted to say he knew the smell of overheated wiring, the language of access panels, the difference between procedure and performance. But none of that would help the woman in the chair, and none of it would teach Mara what he needed her to learn. So he swallowed the anger and picked up the water bottle he had bought with the last singles in his pocket. He twisted off the cap, handed it to Eleanor, and kept his voice low. "Small sips, ma'am." Eleanor accepted it. Her hand brushed his cold and light. "Thank you," she said. Not loud, not dramatic. But Derek's eyes flicked toward the investors as if gratitude itself had become a delay. He tapped on his tablet. Caleb saw the screen reflected faintly in the gate window. Customer care alert. Possible disruption. Male passenger traveling with minor. Monitor. For a second, the airport noise thinned around him. The rolling bags, the boarding chime, the hiss of the espresso machine. All of it seemed to fall behind the sound of Mara breathing beside him. "You're writing him up?" Eleanor asked, and there was something new in her voice now. Not power, not reveal, just a blade wrapped in age. Derek did not look at her directly. "We document interactions for passenger safety." Caleb's hand tightened once around the empty bottle cap before he slipped it into his pocket. "Then document that she needed help before I gave it." Lily glanced up. Tiny pause. Derek's smile hardened by one shade. "Sir, compassion is appreciated, but procedure keeps everyone safe." Caleb looked at the covered screen, the pass in Derek's hand, the old woman's pin hidden again beneath gray wool. "Then procedure should have seen her before I did." The gate went quiet just long enough for Derek to hear the sentence land, and as he turned away, he folded Eleanor's boarding pass in half, hiding the amber code that had never belonged on an ordinary ticket. Derek folded Eleanor's boarding pass as if paper could hide a truth already trying to breathe. The amber code disappeared between his fingers, and with it went the only thing at gate B17 that did not match his perfect version of the morning. Caleb saw the motion. Lily saw it too, though she lowered her eyes quickly to the scanner. Eleanor sat on Caleb's denim jacket, both hands wrapped around the water bottle, watching the folded pass with the stillness of someone who had learned long ago that powerful people reveal themselves most clearly when they think no one important is watching. "We'll get this sorted," Derek said. "No need for concern." "Then why fold it?" Caleb asked. Not loud, not sharp, just plain enough to make the question harder to dismiss. Derek's smile held, but only because men like him trained their faces to survive small accidents. "Sir, I understand travel can be stressful, especially with a child." He glanced at Mara's yellow knit cap, then at the sealed hospital envelope peeking from Caleb's jacket pocket. "Let's not escalate something simple." Mara looked up at her father. "Are we still going to Dallas?" Caleb's jaw moved once. He knelt in front of her, bringing his eyes level with hers, shielding her from the investor's restless looks and the quiet judgment collecting around the gate. "We're going to do everything we can," he said. "But right now we're going to be decent." The words were not a speech. They were small, almost private, spoken over the squeak of suitcase wheels and the distant call of another boarding group. Mara nodded as if he had handed her something to hold. Then her gaze dropped to Eleanor's shoes. One lace had come untied, thin and gray against the shiny tile. Eleanor had not noticed. Or maybe she had and did not want to bend because the whole gate had already watched her almost fall. Caleb noticed. He always noticed the little things that could make a person stumble. A loose panel screw, a low tire, a shoelace under a trembling foot. Without asking permission in a way that would embarrass her, he stepped closer and said, "Ma'am, your lace is loose. May I?" Eleanor's eyes flickered, surprised by the dignity in the question. After a beat, she nodded. Caleb crouched in the aisle, his worn work boots planted beside the polished shoes of the investors, and tied the old woman's shoelace with the same care he had used on Mara's an hour earlier in the garage. The floor smelled of lemon cleaner and damp coats. Overhead, the gate lights buzzed cold and steady. No one applauded. No one softened. A man in a navy blazer watched Caleb kneel and gave a half-smile that made kindness look like defeat. "Here," the man said, pulling out a crisp $50 bill. "For the seat, or the shoe shine, whatever we're calling this." A couple of people chuckled under their breath. Mara's fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. Caleb stood slowly, not because he wanted drama, but because he refused to make the old woman watch him be bought while sitting. On his coat, he looked at the bill, then at the man. "The seat was given," Caleb said. "Not sold." The businessman's smile thinned. "Relax. I'm just trying to help." "Then help her be seen," Caleb replied, and turned away before pride could make him say more. Eleanor stared at him with a kind of ache behind her eyes. Not gratitude exactly. Something deeper, more cautious, as if she had heard those words in a language the airline used to speak before it learned profit margins and investor decks. She shifted the water bottle to her lap, and as she did, The silver wing pin slipped loose from the fold of her gray sweater. It fell without a sound onto Caleb's denim jacket. Mara saw it first. "Daddy," she whispered, pointing only with her eyes the way children do when they know something is delicate. Caleb picked it up with 2 fingers. The pin was colder than he expected. Tarnish had gathered in the grooves of the wings, and on the back, beneath years of scratches, were 2 letters and a date worn almost smooth. "EW, first flight, 1978. He did not know what it meant. Maybe a husband's initials. Maybe a retirement keepsake. Maybe nothing but a memory that had survived longer than the people who understood it. He rubbed the edge once with his thumb, clearing a smear of dust from the engraving, then placed it carefully into Eleanor's open palm. "Looks like it matters," he said. Eleanor closed her fingers around it. Her lips parted, but for several seconds she only breathed. "It did," she said at last. "It still does." Derek, who had been speaking quietly into his phone near the gate podium, glanced over just as Caleb returned the pin. His eyes did not go to Eleanor's face. They went to the object in her hand, then away too quickly. Caleb caught that too. Another little thing. Another loose screw. On Derek's tablet, the customer care alert remained open, and his thumb added a new line beneath Caleb's name. Emotionally sensitive, monitor closely. He had seen the hospital envelope. He had seen Mara's tired legs. He had seen an old woman nearly fall. And somehow the only danger he could name was the man helping them. Eleanor's gaze followed Derek's hand, then dropped to Mara, who had quietly moved her backpack onto the floor so the old woman could rest both feet without touching it. That tiny adjustment, made by a child who had already given up her seat, made Eleanor look away toward the rain-streaked window as if something inside her had cracked. Caleb did not understand her silence. Not yet. He only knew that the folded boarding pass was still in Derek's possession. The silver pin was no ordinary trinket to the woman holding it, and the smallest acts of kindness at Gate B17 were beginning to point toward a truth someone was working very hard to keep folded shut. Derek's thumb stopped moving the moment he saw Eleanor close her hand around the silver wing pin. It was not a dramatic pause. No one near the windows would have noticed it, but Caleb did. He had spent years listening for changes too small for passengers to hear. The faint hiccup in an engine spool, the soft click of a latch not seated right, the half-second when a man's hand betrayed what his mouth was trying to hide. Derek slipped the tablet against his chest and turned back toward the gate podium. "All right," he said, still smiling, still warm, still in control. "Let's keep this moving." Lily stood behind the counter with Eleanor's boarding pass scanner still active, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. The amber alert had disappeared from the screen, replaced by the normal blue boarding interface, but the machine gave another low chirp when she rescanned the pass from memory. Caleb heard it. Mara heard it too, because children notice strange sounds when adults pretend nothing is wrong. "Daddy?" she whispered. "That beep was different." Caleb placed a gentle hand on the top of her backpack. "I heard it." Derek's eyes flicked toward them. "There's no issue with the flight," he said quickly. "Legacy records sometimes produce false prompts, especially for elderly travelers using paper documents." Eleanor looked down at the crumpled boarding pass now back in Derek's hand. Her face did not change, but the water bottle trembled once against her knee. "You keep saying elderly," Caleb said. "Is that part of the code?" The question was simple enough to sound innocent. That was what made it land. Lily looked up. The investors stopped pretending not to listen. Even the boarding announcement seemed to hang unfinished in the ceiling speakers. Derek gave a small, professional laugh. "Sir, no. It's merely context. Then the code should still be verified." "And it will be," Derek said, "by the proper personnel." Caleb glanced at Lily, then at the pass. "She is the proper personnel at the gate." It was not defiance. It was structure. A plain sentence placed exactly where Derek did not want it. Lily swallowed. Her badge clicked softly against the counter as she reached for the pass again. Derek hesitated, then handed it over with 2 fingers, as if the paper had become unpleasant to touch. Lily smoothed it under the scanner. The screen flashed amber again. This time she did not look away. Manual verify. F-audit/1978. Beneath it, half a second later, another line appeared before the system timed out. Founder access. Seat unassigned by design. Lily's breath caught. Mr. Voss, she said quietly. This is asking for manual verification. Derek stepped closer, blocking the screen from the waiting passengers with his shoulder. It's an archival flag. It says founder access. I know what it says. His voice stayed soft, but the softness had tightened around the edges. Caleb watched Eleanor then. Not Derek. Not Lily. Eleanor. The old woman's eyes had fixed on the word founder as if it were not a surprise, but a wound she had been waiting to see reopened. Still she said nothing. Still she kept the pin hidden in her palm. Caleb did not know what she was protecting or whom. He only knew the room had shifted by a few degrees. Derek leaned over Lily's keyboard. Cancel the manual process. We can verify on board if needed. Lily's finger paused above the key. The system recommends doing it before boarding, and I am overriding that recommendation. Should I print the override receipt? No, the answer came too fast. Lily blinked. Derek softened immediately, like a man smoothing a wrinkle from a suit. Not necessary, Lily. We don't need to create extra paperwork for a harmless glitch. But the printer under the counter had already awakened. A thin strip of paper slid out with a dry mechanical whisper. Caleb saw Derek's jaw tighten before his hand moved. Lily tore the receipt free, but Derek reached for it almost at once. He did not snatch it. He was too careful for that. He simply took it with authority, folded it once, and tucked it beneath his tablet. Caleb caught a glimpse before it vanished. Gate B-17, Flight 218, timestamp 8:42 a.m., F-audit/1978, founder access, manual override initiated. Mara leaned closer to Caleb's side. That was already printed, she whispered, small and worried. Why did he say no? Caleb looked down at her. Because sometimes paper remembers what people don't want said out loud. Eleanor heard him. Her eyes lifted, and for the first time since he had helped her sit, Caleb saw something behind her tiredness that did not belong to weakness. It was grief, yes, but also restraint. A hard, old restraint. The kind that kept a door closed until the right person stood on the other side. Derek turned back to the waiting crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll begin family and priority boarding momentarily. His voice filled the gate area like polished brass. It sounded reasonable. It sounded safe. It sounded like nothing was wrong. But he had placed himself directly between the gate camera and Lily's screen, and Caleb noticed that too. The camera above the boarding door reflected in the window behind him. A small black dome staring down at the counter. Derek knew where it was. He had stepped just far enough to block what the screen showed. Not the people, not the pass, only the evidence. Lily's fingers moved quickly below the counter, almost hidden by the edge of her blazer sleeve. She looked frightened, but not frozen. A faint blue light blinked on the side of her terminal. Caleb did not know the system, not this one, not enough to name what she had done. But he knew a saved scan when he saw one. Derek did not. He had been too busy controlling the room. Eleanor shifted in the chair, the denim jacket beneath her rustling softly. The silver wing pin pressed between her fingers until her knuckles whitened. Caleb looked from the folded receipt under Derek's tablet to the hidden pin in Eleanor's hand, and the two small things, paper and metal, suddenly felt like parts of the same locked door. The folded receipt under Derek's tablet and the silver pin in Eleanor's hand rode the silence all the way to the boarding call. They were small things, no heavier than paper and metal, yet Caleb felt the weight of them as clearly as the toolbox handle cutting into his palm. At gate B-17, the line began to move again. The scanners chirped. Suitcase wheels clicked over the seams in the tile. Derek Voss guided the VIP investors forward with a calm smile, as if the amber warning, the hidden receipt, and the old woman sitting on a mechanic's coat had all been folded neatly out of sight. We'll board our premium guests first, he announced. Then families requiring assistance. Caleb looked at Eleanor. You don't have to rush. Derek turned at once. Mr. Turner, we do appreciate your concern, but our team has this handled. Then handle her gently, Caleb said. Not loud. Not enough to start a fight. Just enough for Lily's eyes to lift from the counter. Eleanor tucked the wing pin back beneath her sweater, but her fingers lingered there, as if checking that a piece of herself was still in place. Mara stood beside Caleb with her backpack against her chest and the hospital envelope now safely inside the front pocket. She had stopped asking questions for the moment. Children do that when grown-ups make the air too complicated. They become quiet little weather vanes, turning toward whoever feels safe. When a wheelchair arrived at the mouth of the jet bridge, pushed by a young airport contractor with tired eyes and a radio clipped to his belt, Derek smiled again. There we are, he said. A simple accommodation. The word simple seemed to make Eleanor smaller. She glanced at the chair, then at Caleb, not asking for rescue, not wanting pity, only trying to decide whether accepting help would cost her another piece of dignity. Caleb stepped closer, leaving room for her to choose. It's just a chair, ma'am, he said quietly. Not a verdict. Something in her shoulders eased. The contractor positioned the wheelchair, and Eleanor rose with care, one hand on her cane, one hand on the armrest. The jet bridge beyond them sloped gently downward, gray and narrow, humming with recycled air and the dull thump of luggage being loaded below. The smell changed there, from coffee and floor cleaner to rain-soaked metal and jet fuel. Caleb knew that smell. It lived in his clothes. It lived in his bones. Derek motioned for the investors to continue ahead. Let's keep the flow moving. The contractor began to push Eleanor forward. The wheelchair rolled 3 feet. Then Caleb heard it. A dry, skipping rattle from the right wheel. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just wrong. He looked down and saw the brake lever tremble loose with each turn, the rear wheel wobbling slightly as the chair crossed the rubber threshold into the jet bridge. Hold up, Caleb said. The contractor didn't hear him over the boarding noise. The chair rolled onto the slope. Eleanor's hands tightened on the armrests. The right wheel shuddered, caught, then slipped forward half a foot too fast. Caleb moved before anyone else understood the problem. He stepped into the jet bridge, planted his boot in front of the wheel, and caught the chair by its side frame with one steady hand. Eleanor gasped once. Mara whispered, "Daddy." The investors behind Derek stopped. One suitcase handle clicked down and stayed there. The overhead air vent hummed suddenly louder, filling the narrow bridge with a cold mechanical breath. Caleb did not make a show of it. He did not glare at the contractor, who had gone pale. He crouched beside the wheel and tested the brake with 2 fingers. It gave way too easily. Then he looked at the inspection tag zip-tied beneath the frame. The paper was curled at the edges, printed in fading black ink. Last safety check, 8 months ago. Due 3 months ago. Caleb turned the tag toward the light leaking from the aircraft door. This chair's brake tag is expired. Derek's face tightened, then smoothed. Mr. Turner, please don't interfere with airport equipment. I'm not interfering, Caleb said. I'm stopping it from failing on a slope. The contractor swallowed. They gave me this one from storage. Didn't know. I know, Caleb said, and that was the first mercy in the jet bridge. He did not hand blame to the easiest person. He kept one hand on the chair so Eleanor would not feel herself drift. Ruth Hale, the senior flight attendant at the aircraft door, had seen the whole thing. Her navy uniform was neat, her hair pinned with silver at the temples, but her eyes were no longer professional in the empty way Derek liked. They were awake. She stepped down from the aircraft threshold and looked at the brake tag herself. That needs to be filed, she said. Derek's voice came lightly from behind her. Let's not turn a minor equipment issue into an incident before we understand it. Ruth looked at him. A passenger almost rolled down the bridge. Almost, Derek said. Thanks to Mr. Turner's quick reaction, no harm done. We'll swap the chair and keep boarding. Caleb stood slowly. His knee cracked from the crouch, and for 1 second the long night in the hangar showed on his face. He looked exhausted, grease still caught in the crease of one knuckle, denim jacket missing because Eleanor had been sitting on it, daughter waiting with frightened eyes. But his voice stayed even. Safety that hides paperwork isn't safety. It's luck. The words did not echo exactly. The jet bridge was too padded, too narrow, too full of people pretending not to hear. But they landed. Ruth's hand moved to the tablet clipped at her side. She opened the medical assistance log, then hesitated when Derek's polished shoe stepped half a pace closer. "Ruth," he said, not unkindly, and somehow that made it worse. "File it after departure. We don't need to alarm passengers." Eleanor's head turned. Slowly. Not toward Derek first, but toward Caleb. He had not used the expired tag to humiliate anyone. He had not accused the contractor. He had not announced his own experience around aircraft systems. He had simply seen the loose thing before it broke, and refused to let everyone call that inconvenience. Her hand went under her sweater again, touching the wing pin as if it were no longer only a memory but a measure. Ruth's thumb hovered over the tablet. Then, almost casually, she tilted it down and took a picture of the brake tag before Derek could see the screen. A tiny shutter sound disappeared beneath the vent noise. Caleb heard it. Eleanor heard it too. Mara stepped closer to her father, less afraid now, and slipped her small hand into his. "You stopped it," she whispered. Caleb squeezed once. "We all saw it," he said. But Derek was already guiding the moment back into shape, requesting a replacement chair, apologizing to the investors for the brief delay, and speaking in that same clean voice that made danger sound like housekeeping. Still, the air had changed. Ruth did not close the log. Eleanor did not look away. And when the replacement wheelchair arrived, its inspection tag fresh and bright under the jet bridge lights, Caleb saw Ruth quietly attach the photo of the expired brake tag to an unfinished report titled Elderly Passenger Assistance. Gate B17, Flight 218, and beneath it, in a field Derek clearly had not expected anyone to open yet, the system displayed 3 older entries closed with the same phrase, "Passenger Confusion." The phrase "passenger confusion" sat on Ruth Hale's tablet like a stain no one had bothered to clean. 3 older entries, same wording, same regional approval line, same quiet burial beneath the bright blue interface of Whitmore skies. Caleb saw only enough to understand the shape of it before Ruth angled the screen closer to her chest, not to hide it from him, but to protect what she had just found. The jet bridge had gone strangely still. The replacement wheelchair waited with its fresh inspection tag hanging bright and clean beneath the frame, but no one moved Eleanor forward. Outside the small oval windows, rain slid down the glass in thin crooked lines, and beyond it the aircraft sat breathing softly through its vents, ready to carry hundreds of strangers into the sky as if nothing beneath its door had almost failed. Derek Voss stepped in with a smile that had lost half a degree of warmth. "Ruth, we can document equipment concerns after departure." "This isn't just equipment," Ruth said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not bend. "There are other assistance reports." Derek's eyes moved to the tablet. "Internal. Records are not passenger-facing." "She is the passenger," Caleb said, one hand resting lightly on the back of Eleanor's chair. "And she almost got hurt." Derek did not look at him. That was the first sign of strain. Men like Derek dismissed people by looking through them, but now he was refusing to look at Caleb because the mechanic had become inconveniently visible. "Mr. Turner, you've helped enough." Caleb glanced down at Mara. She was pressed against the jet bridge wall, small beneath the hard white lights, her backpack straps twisted in her fingers. The hospital envelope was safely tucked away, but he could feel its weight anyway. Dallas was waiting. A doctor was waiting. A chance at one clear answer for his daughter's fragile heart was waiting. Every minute of delay pulled at him like a hook. He could have let Derek take Eleanor away. He could have told himself that Ruth had the report now, that the system would handle it, that his job was to get Mara to Dallas. Instead, he looked at the expired brake tag photo glowing on Ruth's tablet, then at Eleanor's pale hand gripping the armrest. "I'm not here to win an argument," he said. "I'm here to make sure nobody calls her confusion when the chair failed." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. Not from weakness, from impact. The word had found something old in her. Ruth scrolled once, carefully. The 3 older entries expanded into summaries.
Elderly passenger disoriented at Denver gate.
Resolved. Passenger confusion. Disabled veteran delayed at Phoenix transfer. Resolved. Passenger confusion. Widowed traveler removed from priority lane at Nashville after requesting manual assistance. Resolved. Passenger confusion. Under each one a regional review signature. Derek Voss. The tablet light reflected in Eleanor's eyes when she opened them again. Her face did not reveal anger the way most people expected anger to look. It went still instead, heartbreak pressed into discipline. Caleb noticed her thumb moving over the hidden wing pin beneath the gray sweater, tracing it as if she were touching a grave marker. Those were people, she said. Derek replied too quickly. Those were resolved incidents.
No, Eleanor,
said. Those were people. The jet bridge seemed to shrink around that sentence. Even the contractor, still standing beside the replacement wheelchair, lowered his radio from his mouth. Ruth tapped another tab, and the system asked for supervisor credentials. She hesitated. Derek stepped closer. That's enough, Ruth. I need to verify the passenger's assistance status. You need to board the aircraft. The manifest has a lock on her record. Derek's smile returned, but it no longer belonged to his eyes. Legacy flag. I already explained that. Ruth's jaw tightened. She entered her crew authorization. The screen thought for a second too long. Then a line appeared, half hidden under access restrictions. EW founder audit. Seat unassigned by design. For a moment, nobody spoke. Caleb did not understand every part of it, but he understood enough. Founder audit was not a normal passenger note. Seat unassigned by design was not a glitch. And EW matched the letters on the silver pin that Eleanor had held like a secret too heavy for one hand. Mara leaned toward him and whispered, Daddy, those are her letters. Caleb squeezed her shoulder once, not to silence her, but to tell her she had seen rightly. Derek heard it too. A faint shine appeared along his temple. He lifted his phone as if checking a schedule, but the motion was too sharp, too private. The screen lit in his hand, and because the jet bridge windows had gone dark with rain, Caleb saw the reflection flash backward in the glass. Investors seated. No dilas. No founder audit drama. Derek turned the phone face down almost instantly. Caleb did not reach for it. He did not accuse. He did not even say what he had seen. Evidence gathered best when pride was not allowed to contaminate it. He had learned that around aircraft, where guessing could kill and anger could make a man miss the loose bolt right in front of him. Ruth, however, had seen the reflection too. So had Eleanor. The old woman's hand fell from her pin into her lap. For the first time that morning, she looked less like someone hiding from power and more like someone deciding whether power had hidden long enough. Derek lowered his voice. Mrs. He stopped before finishing because he still did not know what name he was safe to use. That hesitation was small, but it cracked the mask. Ma'am, he corrected smoothly. I assure you, all assistance reports are reviewed with care. Eleanor studied him. Do you know my name? Derek's mouth opened, then closed. Your boarding document wasn't clear, but you were clear enough to call me confused. Ruth's thumb moved again on the tablet. A quiet chime sounded. She had attached the expired brake tag photo to the open assistance log. A second attachment followed. The partial manual override receipt Lily's terminal had saved at gate B17.
Gate B17.
Flight 218. Manual verify. F-audit/1978. Founder access. The pieces were no longer floating separately. They had begun to lock together. Derek saw the attachments appear and reached for composure. Ruth, that log is premature. The chair rolled, she said. The tag was expired. No injury occurred. Caleb looked at him then, really looked. That's not a safety standard. That's a prayer after the fact. The air vent hummed above them. Somewhere inside the plane, a tray clicked shut. The ordinary sounds of travel continued, but the people in the jet bridge had stopped belonging to them. Eleanor turned to Caleb, and there was no pity in her gaze. No sudden belief because he was poor, no romantic glow of gratitude, no easy trust. Only evidence. She had watched him give a seat when he had little to spare. She had watched him refuse money. She had watched him protect a young contractor from taking blame for a broken system. She had watched him see danger before authority admitted it existed. "Why risk your daughter's flight for a stranger?" she asked. Caleb looked at Mara. His daughter's face was tired, but not ashamed anymore. "Because one day she'll be the stranger," he said. Eleanor's breath caught so softly that only Caleb, standing close, heard it. Derek stepped between them, no longer subtle about separating the mechanic from the old woman. "We are not discussing internal matters in a jet bridge," he said. "This will be handled privately." Ruth looked toward the cabin door, where the captain's voice could be faintly heard speaking to the first officer. Eleanor sat straighter in the replacement wheelchair, the wing pin hidden again but no longer powerless. Caleb kept his hand on Mara's shoulder and said nothing, because the truth had grown too heavy for another quiet corner. Behind Derek's polished smile were a buried alert, a hidden receipt, an expired brake tag, a locked manifest, 3 closed reports, and a phone message that had named the audit before anyone was supposed to know it existed. Whatever came next could no longer be handled where no one else could see. The cabin of Whitmore Sky's Flight 218 waited like a room holding its breath. Overhead bins stood open, jackets hung over seatbacks, and the soft blue aisle lights washed every face in the same uneasy glow. The VIP investors had already settled near the front, their leather bags tucked neatly beneath polished shoes, while other passengers watched the jet bridge in trance with the tired curiosity of people who wanted a story only if it did not cost them time. Caleb Turner stepped inside behind the replacement wheelchair, one hand on Mara's shoulder, the other holding his small toolbox low by his leg. He did not look like a man about to win anything. He looked like a father who had been awake all night, whose daughter still had a doctor waiting in Dallas, and who had chosen not to abandon an old woman just because the room had become uncomfortable. Eleanor sat in the fresh wheelchair, her gray sweater pulled close, the silver wing pin hidden beneath her fingers. Ruth Hale walked beside her with the tablet held against her uniform, and Derek Voss followed a few steps behind with a face arranged into calm authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek said, stopping in the forward galley where everyone could see him, "thank you for your patience. We had a minor assistance issue at the gate and a brief equipment concern in the jet bridge. Both are being handled." His voice was smooth. It filled the cabin without rising. "Unfortunately, a passenger became overly involved and created additional stress for an elderly traveler, so we may need to reseat or deplane the family involved to keep this flight comfortable and safe." The first retention spike came quietly. Several passengers turned toward Caleb, not Derek. A woman in row 2 frowned at his oil-stained knuckles. One investor whispered, "So he caused the delay." Mara heard it. Her little hand found the back pocket of Caleb's jacket and gripped the denim there. Caleb felt the tug but did not turn anger into a shield. He leaned down. "Stay behind me, baby." "Daddy," she whispered. "Don't leave her scared." The words were small, child-sized, and that made them heavier. Caleb straightened. Derek smiled with sympathy that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Turner, no one is leaving anyone scared. We're simply following procedure." Caleb looked at Eleanor first, not the passengers. "Ma'am, do you want to get off this plane?" Eleanor's eyes rose to his. The whole cabin seemed to wait for an answer it had not earned. "No," she said. "I want to be treated like I belong on it." A thin silence spread down the aisle. Derek stepped in before it could deepen. "And you do, ma'am. That's why we are arranging appropriate care." But Mr. Turner's repeated interference, first at gate B17, then with airport equipment, has complicated the process. Ruth's fingers tightened around the tablet. He stopped the wheelchair from rolling. Derek did not look at her. The chair did not roll. It shifted. The brake tag was expired, which is being addressed. It wasn't filed. Derek turned just enough to make his expression visible to the front rows. Patient, regretful, burdened by the need to be firm. Ruth, Internal documentation should not be debated in front of passengers. That almost worked. The cabin understood paperwork. It understood delays. It understood that staff had rules and passengers did not always know them. Derek could feel the room coming back toward him. Then Caleb spoke, his voice low enough that people had to lean in to hear. I don't need your paperwork to make me right. I need it so she doesn't get called confused when your chair failed. No one laughed this time. Somewhere in row 5, a seatbelt buckle stopped clicking halfway. Ruth looked toward the cockpit door. She had been waiting for permission or courage or maybe just the moment when silence would do more harm than speech. She lifted the tablet. Captain Cole should see the assistance log. Derek's head turned sharply. The captain is preparing for departure. Then he should know why departure is being delayed. The second retention spike came when Derek changed strategy. He softened. Completely. Ruth, I respect your diligence. I really do. But this is how misunderstandings damage good people. A hardworking father is tired. An elderly traveler is overwhelmed. A minor equipment tag looks worse than it is. If we make this official before reviewing context, everyone gets hurt. It sounded compassionate. It sounded generous. It even made Caleb, for one aching second, look like the man making things worse. Mara pressed closer behind him. Caleb did not defend his pride. He reached into his jacket pocket and made sure the hospital envelope was still there. Then he looked at Derek. Then review the context. Ruth tapped the screen once. Not a dump. Not a speech. Just the first piece. Gate B17 camera shows Mr. Turner giving up his daughter's seat before he knew anything about this passenger. She swiped. Manual override receipt from the gate terminal. Timestamp 842. F-audit/1978. Founder access. Partially printed before the process was cancelled. Derek's jaw moved. A legacy artifact. Ruth swiped again. Wheelchair brake tag expired 3 months ago. Photo taken before replacement. Equipment issue. Medical assistance log opened only after the nearfall. Derek's smile thinned. Because there was no injury. Caleb looked at him with a sadness that seemed to come from somewhere older than the morning. No injury isn't proof care was given. It's proof mercy arrived in time. Eleanor's hand went to the wing pin beneath her sweater. This time she did not hide the movement. She watched the passengers, watched Ruth, watched Caleb standing tired and quiet in the aisle, and something in her posture changed. Not a reveal. Not yet. But she was no longer shrinking into the chair. Derek saw it and moved to regain the room. We are not conducting a founder protocol review on an investor flight, he said. The words came out clean, but 1 second too fast. Ruth froze. Caleb's eyes lifted. 3 passengers in the first rows looked at one another. Derek knew it before anyone said it back to him. He had used words no one else had spoken aloud. Founder protocol. Investor flight. Eleanor slowly turned her face toward him. Who said this was a founder protocol review, Mr. Voss? Derek's hand tightened around his phone. I'm speaking generally. Ruth was already moving. She sent the tablet packet to the cockpit. Gate B17 camera request, manual override receipt, brake tag photo, open assistance log, manifest lock, and the screenshot reflection she had captured from the jet bridge window showing the message no founder audit drama. The cockpit door opened a few inches. Captain Adrian Cole stepped out, silver hair under his cap, eyes serious from years of deciding which details mattered before lives depended on them. He took Ruth's tablet. The cabin went so quiet the air vents sounded like wind over an empty runway. Derek inhaled as if to speak, but the captain's thumb had already opened the final file, and on the screen, beside the manifest line EW founder audit, a 1978 founder photograph loaded slowly, while Eleanor's hidden silver pin caught the cabin light. The photograph loaded one strip of light at a time, slow enough for the whole cabin to feel the weight of it. First came the grainy edge of an old hangar, then the nose of a white and blue aircraft, then a younger woman standing beside it in 1978 with one hand on a ceremonial ribbon and the other touching a silver wing pin on her lapel. Captain Adrian Cole lowered Ruth's tablet slightly and looked from the screen to the elderly woman in the wheelchair. Eleanor Whitmore did not move. Her fingers rested under the collar of her gray sweater, where the same pin caught a thin blade of cabin light. No one spoke. Not Derek. Not Ruth. Not the investors who had spent the last half hour pretending this delay was beneath them. The air vents whispered overhead, and somewhere in the galley, a plastic cup rolled a quarter-inch before settling against the wall. Captain Cole stepped into the aisle, his posture changing in a way every crew member understood. Before any passenger did, he stood straighter, not stiff with fear, but with recognition. Then, in a voice so quiet the people in row 6 leaned forward to hear it, he said, "Mrs. Whitmore." 2 words. That was all. But they moved through the cabin like the sudden loss of power in a room full of machines. Derek's hand, still holding his phone, dropped slowly to his side. Ruth covered her mouth for half a second, then lowered her hand because this was no longer a private shock. Mara's fingers slipped into Caleb's, small and warm and trembling. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Is that her?" Caleb did not answer right away. He was watching Eleanor. The old woman's eyes had closed, not in pride, not in triumph, but in grief, as if being recognized had cost her something. Then she opened them and reached beneath her sweater. The cabin seemed to lean toward her. She unclipped the silver wing pin with careful hands and turned it over in her palm. The engraving, worn but clear beneath the light, read, "EW First Flight, 1978. Captain Cole took one breath. "I joined Whitmore Skies because of the story behind that pin," he said. "Every pilot here knows it. First flight, first route, first rule." Eleanor looked at him. "And what was the first rule, Captain?" His voice thickened. "No passenger is cargo." The silence deepened until even the people who did not understand the history understood the shame. Ruth set the tablet on the armrest beside Eleanor, and one by one the evidence sat in the open where Derek could no longer fold it, explain it away, or slide it under a device. Gapey 17 camera footage showed Caleb placing his old denim jacket on the seat before anyone knew the old woman's name. The manual override receipt showed F-Audit/1978 and founder access before Derek canceled verification. The brake tag photo showed an expired inspection date on the wheelchair that had nearly rolled down the jet bridge. The medical assistance log showed it had been opened only after Ruth resisted delay. The manifest showed EW, founder audit, seat unassigned by design. And on Ruth's tablet, the reflected message from Derek's phone sat sharp and ugly in the corner of a captured image. "No dilas. No founder audit drama." Derek swallowed. His voice came out dry. "Mrs. Whitmore, there has clearly been a misunderstanding." Eleanor looked at him then, not cruelly, not loudly, and that made the moment worse for him. "A misunderstanding is when someone lacks information," she said. "You had information. You chose appearance." Derek's eyes flicked toward the investors, then toward the passengers, then toward the small black dome of the cabin camera above the galley. For the first time all morning, he seemed aware that being seen was not the same as being admired. "I was trying to protect operational flow," he said, "and passenger comfort." Eleanor's hand closed around the pin. "You protected comfort from the uncomfortable." A phone buzzed somewhere in the front row, but no one reached for it. A man who had laughed earlier stared down at his shoes. The businessman who had offered Caleb $50 pressed the bill flat against his knee as if it had become evidence of his own smallness. Derek tried again. The father became involved beyond his role. Caleb finally spoke, not to defend himself, but to keep the truth from being dragged sideways. "My role was father," he said. "My daughter was watching." Mara looked up at him, and the fear in her face softened into something steadier. She did not smile. Children know when a room is too serious for smiling. She only held his hand tighter. Eleanor turned toward Caleb, and now everyone saw what she had seen from the beginning. The oil in his knuckles, the frayed Air Force patch, the exhaustion under his eyes, the hospital envelope edge showing from his jacket pocket, and the way he stood close enough to protect but far enough not to claim the moment. "Mr. Turner did not know who I was," Eleanor said. That is why what he did matters. The word struck harder than any accusation. Derek had no answer for that. His mouth opened once, then closed. Captain Cole shifted the tablet back toward Ruth. Mrs. Whitmore, do you want this handled after landing? Eleanor looked down the aisle, past the first-class seats, past the waiting passengers, past the investors whose silence had become part of the record. No, she said. We begin now. Derek's face changed by a fraction. Not panic. Not yet. But the dry pallor of a man hearing the lock turn from the outside. Eleanor lifted the wing pin and held it not high, not theatrically, just enough for the cabin to see. I built this airline so tired people, old people, working people, frightened children, and travelers with no one beside them would still be treated with dignity, she said. I did not build it so they could be moved out of sight for investor comfort. Ruth's eyes filled. Lily was not in the cabin, but her saved scan was. The unnamed passengers from Denver, Phoenix, and Nashville were not in the cabin either, but their closed reports were. For the first time, their silence had witnesses. Eleanor looked at Ruth. Open a formal audit. Ruth nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Preserve the Gate B-17 footage. Already requested. Attach the manual override receipt, the wheelchair tag, the assistance log, the locked manifest, and Mr. Voss's message. Derek inhaled. Mrs. Whitmore, I would strongly advise we discuss this privately. Eleanor turned back to him. You made their dignity public. The correction can begin in public. That was when the cabin truly went silent. Not quiet, silent. A silence with weight. A silence where the hum of the air system became loud. Where a paper napkin shifting on a tray table sounded like thunder. Where every person who had judged too quickly had to sit inside the judgment they had helped create. Captain Cole removed his cap for one brief second, then replaced it. Mr. Voss, he said, formal now. You are relieved from any passenger handling decisions for this flight pending review. Derek looked at the captain, then at Eleanor, then at the tablet filled with proof. His phone slipped slightly in his damp hand, tapped against the armrest of row 1, and stayed there. Caleb did not watch him fall. He looked at Mara instead. She was staring at Eleanor's wing pin, not with greed, not with awe, but with the confused relief of a child realizing that kindness had not been foolish after all. Eleanor saw it and lowered the pin back to her lap. Her voice softened. Mr. Turner, your daughter gave me a seat. When this airline forgot how. Caleb shook his head once. She did what she knew was right. Because someone taught her. He had no answer to that. Praise sat uncomfortably on him, heavier than blame. The cabin remained still as Flight 218 waited at the gate, no longer delayed by confusion, but held in place by truth. And as Eleanor Whitmore opened the audit that would shake her own company, Caleb Turner stood beside his daughter wondering what a man is supposed to do when the miracle he never asked for turns and looks directly at him.